Advent season is upon us, which means you probably have a whole bunch of these little mini skeins waiting for you to open them up and wind them. If you're like me, you don't want to keep your winder and Swift out for 25 days, but hand winding can be tricky. So I'm going to show you how to wind a mini skein with no tools in 10 minutes or less. Start with a nice flat surface. A table can be great, or even sitting on the couch or on a bed. I have even wound yarn standing at the kitchen table. Alternatively, you can sit cross-legged, and when you open the yarn, put it around your knees to assist with the winding, or grab 2 cans or 2 bottles. But since this is a tutorial on using no tools, we're not going to do that today. The only thing you're going to need is a pair of scissors. You don't necessarily have to have the scissors, but it will save you a lot of time and not having to untie all of these knots. Okay, let's get started. So the first thing you're going to do is locate the end of the mini skein where the 2 loops are like tucked into each other. So you'll see that one side is all smooth. This is where the skein has been bent in half. We're going to find the other side here. Now, as you open it up, you're going to want to try really hard to keep these strands of yarn and the strands of yarn that are coming through separated. So I like to turn it over like this, where I can see this like band that's coming across horizontally. Grab onto that, and we're going to untuck that and make sure to try to hang on to the separation of the strands. And then you can just let things come undone. I'm still hanging on here. And we're going to get this all separated out like so. Our second step is to check our ties. So this skein of yarn has 3 areas where it has been tied. So you'll see there are yarn strands going across that are going to be cut. Pay attention to the tie that looks like this. It has multiple strands, maybe 4 strands sometimes, coming across. There we go, coming together. This is going to be the one that contains your 2 ends, your 2 working ends. So you're going to save this one to cut last. The other ties are going to look like just 2 strands together, more like this one that just has 2 strands. But we're also going to be checking and kind of pulling on those and making sure that nothing goes across them. So there's no like stray strands on either side going across that we would need to sort out and fix. Now that you've identified which one to cut last, we're going to start cutting our ties. So you can cut the ones that do not have the multiple strands just by snipping off the knot and then pulling the tie out. And just repeat that with however many there are. Every yarn is going to be a little bit different. And then we've saved this one for last because we're going to get our 2 ends from it. Again, just cut the knot. There's still going to be a piece that you can pull out. And then we're left with 2 strands. It's time to actually start winding, and that's what step 3 is. I'm going to focus on how to wind first, and then we're going to talk about how to manage this hank of yarn, although they need to be done simultaneously, but just in demonstration, I'm going to show one at a time. So I like to pick a strand that is coming like freely and easily from the ball of yarn. I mean, a lot of times both will do that, but if one's feeling a little twisty, leave it alone and select the other one. This is kind of a bonus step, but I also like to just kind of go around and let the yarn kind of untwist itself as I pull up one strand of yarn. That may not have been the best one to select, but this is just going to make things easier for us. See how it's flipping the whole thing around as I pull? I'm just going to let that happen. Actually, I might go one more time around, but see how now it's lying a lot flatter and more open for us. And that can be tricky to do once you start winding the yarn around your finger, so I kind of like to do that step first. To start winding the ball of yarn, just lay one of the strands in your hand, and I like to pinch it between my thumb and my middle finger. Then create a space between your middle finger and your index finger and start to wind around. There's not really like an exact science here, but just do a bit. And remember, you're gonna need to manage the skein at the same time that you're doing this, but I just wanted to show these in separate steps. So once you have about, I don't know, that much, maybe 20 around, you can take it off your fingers and you're going to wind in the middle of this, almost like you're just like squishing and creating a bow. This does not have to be exact or perfect yet. See that it doesn't even look like a ball. So now that we kind of have our little bow, I like to just kind of smush it and then start winding like a ball. In order for it to start looking like a ball, really does take a few turns around. So don't stress, it's gonna look messy at first. So I like to do a few winds around one way. I don't count, but I'd say maybe 10. And then rotate it, is that 90 degrees? I don't know, rotate it like that. And then wind this way, okay? And then rotate it again and wind. From now on, I'm not gonna rotate it quite 90 degrees, but just like a little bit at a time. I'm gonna do a few winds around, rotate it just a touch, wind it a few more times, and then rotate it just a touch. Once I've gone, I don't know, most of the way around, I then like to flip the other way. So it's kind of creating this like flatter ball shape. I'll rotate it towards me, squish it a little, and then go this way and do the same thing. So our mantra for winding our ball is wrap, 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 rotate, wrap, 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 rotate, wrap, 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 wrap. Oh, try to stay in focus. Rotate, and then turn it towards us and do this the other way. I promise you, as you go, you'll kind of get into a rhythm where you're just kind of constantly like rotating the ball with one hand. And oh, you know what I forgot to mention? I suggest holding the ball with your non-dominant hand and controlling the yarn with your dominant hand. But you'll just kind of get in a rhythm where you're just like kind of constantly like, I'm just kind of going like this, rotating the ball. And then eventually it'll feel kind of like it's getting that oblong shape again, and I'll just flip it towards me and then keep going. And I promise you, it gets so much easier. So now that we're starting to get the ball winding part down, let's zoom back out and I'll show you how to manage the skein. Simultaneously, while winding the ball, you're also going to be trying to maintain this shape with your skein. I will say that some are better than others, and if you're really having trouble with it, I would definitely suggest the method where you place 2 cans or bottles in or put this on your knees sitting crisscross. The reason I don't love to do the cans or bottles one is because it takes just a little bit more effort to like keep your arms lifted, and I like to do things easy, the easy way, but there are some skeins that are just giving me so much trouble, I need a little extra assistance. So you're winding along, and you can do this 2 ways. You can either set the ball down and pull yarn off of your hank. Now see how this just started to come over? You want to make sure you're always keeping that circular shape. Sometimes it needs a little help. Actually, I might keep the ball outside. And you can kind of just lay your hand down behind the yarn and just lift it off gently. Especially for knottier skeins, this is going to be the way to go. Anytime things get a little messy, just pull them apart. You don't need to pull tight, but you just want to maintain a clean space in the middle. Then once you have a bit of yarn, you can stop and you can wind it all onto the ball until it all gets used up. So that's one way to do it, and I will say it's probably the better way, but I don't know why it's not often the way that I do it. The second way is you can wind as you feed off of your skein. It's a little riskier. As you can see, there's already some stuff coming up. If something like this happens, rarely do you ever need to actually feed the yarn through. It's more just that like maybe it's gotten a little tangled out of shape here. See? So I would suggest try your hardest never to feed the yarn through because you might actually create some tangles. Okay, so now that we got past that snag, let's give it a try, winding and going around at the same time. Anytime I do hit like a little snag, I can take one hand off and help it out a little bit. This is the method that I like to do. So I may wind for a bit and then I may go, okay, things are getting a little messy. Let's scoot them back out. Again, don't pull tight because you might create more tangles here. So I'm just gonna keep going and going just like this, combining the two things that we just learned, rotating my ball as I'm going, and managing my hank. See, there it is, all done in 10 minutes or less. Now you're ready for your Advent knitting and crocheting. Speaking of, if you're still looking for Advent patterns, you may want to check out my top 10 video that I will have linked here, or you can go to the Advent Ravelry bundle where I put together a ton of Advent patterns that I will also link down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!